Huh. So that's what all that cap space was for. Along with Jaden Schwartz and Philip Grubauer, the Seattle Kraken also took a bit of a chance by signing Alex Wennberg, formerly of the Florida Panthers. The Kraken pick up the 26-year-old center for a deal that will earn him $4.5 million for each of the next 3 seasons. It's a deal that definitely has some people around hockey raising their eyebrows just a little bit, but based on what he did this last season, he would be worth it. Of course, with the question being whether or not he can build off of that breakout season that he had with the Panthers this last year. As was just mentioned, he is a 26-year-old center, though to be fair, he will be turning 27 here pretty soon and before the season actually gets started. The Swede was picked in the first round with the 14th overall pick, just like Jaden Schwartz, who the Kraken also picked up in free agency. But for Wennberg, it was in the 2013 draft by Columbus. He would make his NHL debut just a year later at the age of 20, and would play 68 games in that first season, putting up 20 points on 4 goals and 16 assists. And then in the following year, playing just one more game and not significantly more ice time, he would double all of those numbers, and then improve again with an 80-game season in the 2016-17 year with 13 goals, 46 assists for 59 points. It was certainly a pretty respectable start to his young career, and the fact that he made the most of an expanded role in that 2016-17 season that earned him a contract with Columbus that next year that would pay him $4.9 million for the next 6 seasons. Of course, as you can probably tell, that was less than 6 years ago. So this is where some of that eyebrow raising at the contract he just signed with Seattle for $4.5 million starts to come in. Because over the next 3 seasons to start out that $4.9 million contract with the Blue Jackets, he started to regress pretty quickly, never scoring more than 10 goals again in Columbus and putting up fewer and fewer points each season over those next 3 years. All of which eventually led to him being bought out of the last 3 years of that contract in Columbus at the end of the 2019-20 season. And then, of course, he would sign with the Florida Panthers in that offseason and played the full 56 games in the 2021 season, where he did have that bounce back year with 17 goals and 12 assists for 29 points in those 56 games. Which, in a full 82 game season, would have put him on pace for a 25 goal, 43-point year. Now, it's also fair to mention that even with the concerns over that declining points production in Columbus, again putting aside that year in Florida for a second, he still is a pretty decent two-way forward and wouldn't be a true Seattle forward without that part of his game, with pretty good underlying stats and possession metrics throughout his time with the Blue Jackets. And of course, I only mention that because it definitely did play a role in him getting signed by the Kraken during this free agency period, as during the post-signing press conference, Ron Francis had this to say about him, quote, "He was the guy that kind of went onto the ice and calmed things down, and I think he's a smart player. I think he can really play all 3 zones." But he was also sure to point out the important role that bounce back year in Florida played in him getting signed, saying he has the skill set to play the power play, which is definitely something Seattle needs. So hopefully last year was just the start of something for him and he can continue to get better moving forward. So again, this is a signing that is the Kraken taking a bit of a chance on Wennberg, and the fact that last year was not just a flash in the pan. Of course, paying him just $400,000 less than what Columbus bought him out for just over a year ago. Now, it does help that the term is quite a bit less at just 3 years on this contract, so if things don't work out in Seattle, it really isn't too debilitating long term as far as that's concerned, which definitely is helpful. And of course, the Kraken do have plenty of cap space to play around with, so even if this was an overpayment by $1 million to $500,000, it still is probably a chance worth taking on a guy that could have pretty decent goal scoring upside, which again, especially from the center position, is something the Kraken sorely need. With that said though, on the other side of the risk that he regresses like he did in Columbus is the fact that there is also the chance that what he showed in Florida this last year is just a taste of what he's actually capable of if put in the right system. And as we've talked about with Vegas, their success in their first season was largely dependent on the breakout seasons and career years from a couple of guys that really hadn't shown that ability up to that point in their career, like William Karlsson and Jonathan Marchessault, who, incidentally, came from Florida and Columbus. As far as what the role is we should expect to see Wennberg play for Seattle is concerned, again, a lot of that's going to be determined by how this season ends up going for him in Seattle and which direction he ends up going based on what he did last year. Of course, the hope is there that he can be a top 6 contributor for the Kraken when it comes to point scoring, and obviously from Ron Francis's comments, I think it would be a pretty safe bet to say that he starts out on the first power play unit as they try to get that goal scoring ability out of him. There's also certainly a chance that he starts out as the opening day first line center for the team, again, especially with Yanni Gourde out with injury for the first month to 2 months of the season. And then, honestly, Gourde's not necessarily a lock for first line center either, so if Wennberg does get that role and plays especially well in it, he could even stay there going on into the later parts of the season. Now, all of that is still again dependent on what else the Kraken do when it comes to picking up players through the rest of free agency and via trades, as they definitely are going to be looking for more center depth, or at least I would expect them to be. So maybe the battle is over second line center, and Wennberg's looking at either that or a third line role, but regardless of where he ends up, with this team likely going to be splitting their time on the forward end pretty evenly between lines, considering they're much more of a deep team than a top-heavy team, I would expect that he's going to be eating up decent minutes wherever he plays. So ultimately with Wennberg, again, much like this Kraken team as a whole, we're just going to have to wait and see what this year holds. It really could go in just about any direction for him and the team as a whole. So again, this was maybe a bit of a risk that the Kraken are taking with the deal that they signed him to, and maybe they overpaid a little bit, but they have the space to do so, and if he can build off of that scoring potential from last year, it certainly could be a risk well worth taking. But as always, I'd definitely love to hear what you guys think of this signing by the Kraken, what role do you think you could see Wennberg playing for the team, and whether or not you like the contract that he's on. Otherwise, that will just about do it for this one. So if you have made it to this point, as always, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below. And until next time, be good to each other and go Kraken.